cabana umbrella above my head was the color of cream, swaying in the late afternoon wind. 5:47, Treasure Island Beach. I was lying back on the white daybed in a thin gray tee and dark navy shorts when Vera stepped under the shade. White silk dress, blonde hair loose. She did not say a word. She placed one knee on my thigh, sat down, pressed a hand to my chest, the other curled at my shoulder. Her face hovered 4 inches from mine. "Kiss me, Sawyer. My ex is watching." I froze. 20 yards down the beach, a man in a pale blue shirt stood very still, sunglasses hooked at his collar. He was looking right at us. "My name is Sawyer Brennan, 39 years old. Residential architect at Kincaid Design Studio in Laguna Beach, California. 6 years running. I live alone in a small apartment on Cliff Drive, west-facing, with a balcony just wide enough for a folding chair and a coffee cup. I got divorced 4 years ago. No kids. My ex-wife's name is Whitney, and I am not going to tell you much about her, because an honest narrator does not need to paint his enemy in flattering colors. I am telling you all of this from the other side of it, from a Sunday morning long after the cabana, when I already know how the story ends. Try to remember that. Every time I say I did not understand something, I really did not. The audience always sees the picture before the man in it does. Let me pull back to the Friday morning 3 days before the beach. Vera called me into her glass office on the 5th floor. She was standing with her back to me, looking out at the Pacific, her left hand rubbing her left wrist. I had memorized that gesture. She always turned the small gold bracelet whenever she was about to say something she did not want to say out loud. "Sawyer," she said, without turning around, "I need you to come down to the Montage with me this weekend. Client retreat. 4 days. You are lead architect on the Crystal Cove project. You should be there." I nodded. I always nodded when Vera asked me for something. At the time I thought it was professional respect. Now I understand it was also something else, and I just did not have a word for it yet. I should tell you how I lived back then, because the man on that daybed 3 days later did not appear out of nowhere. I worked a lot. I had not dated anyone since the divorce. I liked black coffee from the Black Cat trailer in Heisler Park at 7 in the morning. I sketched by hand on Canson paper before I ever touched AutoCAD, and I had never told anyone that 6 years earlier, on my very first day at Kincaid, I had fixed the clasp on Vera's gold bracelet in the parking garage. She had dropped it. The little hook had snapped. I knelt down with a bent paperclip from my interview folder, and in 6 minutes I had it back on her wrist. She thanked me with a look that lasted 3 seconds longer than it needed to. I forgot about it almost immediately. Or, I thought I forgot. The studio was 8 people deep. Marcus, an older partner I respected, the only one besides Vera who had been there since the beginning. Dana, the office manager, the one woman in the building who knew Vera's history because she had filed Vera's wedding invitations, and then, 3 years later, her cancellation notes, a handful of junior architects who treated me like an older brother, white walls, white oak desks, a hand-drawn elevation of a Hawaiian beach house I had done years ago, framed and hanging by the door. I thought I had Vera figured out. That was my mistake. I had thought of her as my boss for so long that I had stopped looking at her like she was a 35-year-old woman. That was my stupidity. At the time, I called it discipline. Thursday afternoon, the day before we drove south, Dana stopped at my desk and set down a stack of briefs. She lingered. She did not usually linger. "Sawyer," she said, "do you know who else is going to be at the Montage this weekend?" "Which client?" I asked, looking up. She pressed her lips together. "No, never mind. Just be careful, okay?" She walked off before I could ask her to finish the sentence. I watched her go. I did not chase her down the hallway. That was the first mistake of the weekend, and I made it on a Thursday. There is a sentence I want to put down here because I will use it more than once. At the time I thought it was just work. Now I understand it was never just work. Hold on to that for me. Friday morning I loaded a leather weekender into my trunk. The Pacific light came through the kitchen window the way it always did, gold mixed with a little orange. I never did get back to Dana with that follow-up question. By the time I would have wanted to, I was already 3 days too late. We checked in Friday afternoon. Vera had put my room next to hers for the meetings. That is a direct quote. The concierge handed me a key card with a small printed note from Miss Kincaid clipped to the sleeve, and and I did not think twice about it. Why would I? Friday night, the client dinner was at the Loft. Two couples down from Pasadena, both in their 50s, both wanting a $20 million villa on the bluff above Crystal Cove. Vera sat across from me at the round table and let me talk. I walked them through cross-ventilation, through the 22-degree roof pitch I wanted to use against the Santa Ana winds, through how a low retaining wall along the southern edge would carve out the view without blocking the sightline from the kitchen. Vera did not say much, but every time I explained something, she set her fingertips on the rim of her water glass and watched me like she was watching a movie she had already seen and still liked. At the end of the meal, she reached past me for the check, and the little key charm on her bracelet tapped against the side of my wine glass with a small clear sound, like a fork at the start of a toast. "You are not paying," she said. "This one is on me." I remember thinking that she had a way of taking care of things without anyone noticing. The Pasadena couples liked her for it. I had been liking her for it for 6 years, and calling it management. Saturday morning I went for a run. The Treasure Island Trail, down past the tide pools, back up the wooden staircase. The Pacific was metal gray at that hour, and there were 3 pelicans riding the line of the swells. I came back to the resort at 7:12. Vera was already on the terrace cafe, 2 cortados in front of her, a single croissant, split in half between 2 plates. "I guessed you liked cortados," she said. I did not remember ever telling her that. She remembered. We talked for an hour. We started on Crystal Cove and slid sideways into her father, who was a retired UCLA professor, and then into my brother, who had moved to Portland a year ago with a woman I had never met. She did not ask about Whitney. I did not ask about anyone named Garrett, because I did not know there was a Garrett to ask about yet. On the way out to the pool around noon, the same valet who had parked my car the day before stopped Vera in the corridor. "Miss Kincaid, someone left a message at the front desk for you." Vera stopped, just for half a second. "Thank you. I will come by later." She did not come by later. I did not press. I saw her face go pale for one beat, and then snap back, and I told myself it was the light coming through the high windows, because that was easier than wondering what kind of message would do that to a woman's face on a Saturday at the Montage. I think now that I had been making that kind of generous excuse for her for years. The trouble with generous excuses is that they also work as a way to avoid paying attention. Saturday afternoon, she asked me to walk a piece of beach with her, a potential lot the clients were quietly considering. We walked for 2 hours. She slipped her sandals off and carried them in 2 fingers. At one point, she stepped on a sliver of broken coral and lost her balance, and I caught her by the hand. Her hand was colder than the sand. She did not pull it back right away. 3 seconds. 4, then she laughed. "I am clumsy," she said. "You are not clumsy," I said, and I laughed too, and I meant it as a joke, and there was nothing in my head when I said it. That is the truth. There was a lot in her head. The audience knows. I did not. We walked the rest of the way back along the wet line of the tide. She told me about a vacation she had taken alone in Lisbon 2 summers earlier, eating dinner by herself at a tiled counter for 10 nights in a row and never feeling lonely once. I told her about the year after my divorce when I had repainted my entire apartment, 3 different shades of white before I admitted I just needed company. She said, "You did not need company. You needed the right company." I had no idea what to do with that sentence, so I let the surf eat it. Saturday night, after dinner, she pulled me down to the Mosaic Bar. 1 hibiki for her, a glass of Sancerre for me. I had it the wrong way around for years until that night. She drank slowly. "Sawyer, do you ever regret anything?" she asked. I thought about it. I regret not talking to Whitney sooner. Not to save the marriage. To save her from having to lie so much. Vera nodded. She turned the bracelet slowly with her thumb. "I regret not telling someone the truth 6 years ago. I think it is too late now." I assumed she was talking about Garrett. I was wrong. I would not understand how wrong for another 24 hours. While she was in the restroom, the bartender, a man named Eddie I knew faintly from a coffee line in Heisler Park, leaned across the wood. "She has worn that bracelet a long time," he said. It was a statement, not a question. I nodded. He smiled, polishing a glass. "I remember her coming in here about 5 years ago with another man. Tall guy. She was not wearing it then. The next summer she came in alone, and she was wearing it, and she has worn it every time I have seen her since. People notice things in this job. We are basically furniture with memory." He shrugged and went back to the glass. I looked down at my own hand on the bar. I could not have told you why my pulse picked up. I just remember that it did, and I did not have anywhere to put the feeling. There are some women who get your attention because they are loud. There are some women who get your attention because they have remembered, for 6 years, that you take cortado and not a latte. I had been around the first kind in my marriage. I had not understood until that night that I had been quietly working next to the second kind for almost a decade. Sunday morning at 6:30, Vera knocked on my door. She had on a white linen jacket over what I assume was a bikini, 2 cortados in a cardboard tray, and her hair tied back in a loose knot. "Walk with me," she said. We went down to Gough Cove, and we did not say much. The light at that hour is pink along the horizon and clean white at the waterline. She stopped at a flat slab of rock and sat down and looked out at the water for a long time. The wind was light enough that I could hear her sandals against the wood of the boardwalk behind us. Her hair smelled like salt and grapefruit shampoo. Then she said it very quietly. "Sawyer, if something happens today that I need help with, will you help me?" I turned to her. "What kind of something?" She shook her head. "I do not know yet. Will you help me?" I said yes. I did not even think about it. I said yes the way I had been saying yes to her for 6 years. She did say one more thing, sitting on that rock. She said, "I am not good at saying important things. I am only good at standing next to people." I told her that was a pretty good skill. I did not understand, until much later, that it was the truest sentence she had ever spoken to me. I did not understand it that morning. I am not sure I would have understood it that afternoon either. I walked back to my room at 8. There was a new text on my phone. Unknown number. No name. "Sawyer, I know you are at the montage with her. I will be there at noon. G." I had no idea who G was. I also had no way of knowing that at 7 o'clock that same morning, Whitney had sent an email to Vera's work address with a subject line designed to ruin me. Lunch was at 12:30 on the terrace. Vera ordered a Niçoise salad and pushed it around with a fork. Her eyes flicked toward the lobby entrance 3 times in the first 10 minutes. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I am okay," she said. "Then, will you walk down to the beach with me for a little while? I want to sit at the cabana." I should have read that as a request that was already loaded. I did not. We walked down the wooden path to cabana number 7, Treasure Island Beach. Vera set her tote down on the chair beside the daybed, but she did not sit in it. She stood next to me with her hand on her left wrist, turning the bracelet over and over the way a person turns a worry stone. "Sawyer, sit on the daybed." I sat. She looked over my shoulder toward the path that led down from the lobby. The afternoon sun was hard and white. I could feel the heat of the canvas on my back through the cushion. The sand around the cabana was bright enough that I had to keep my eyes half closed. At 12:54, a man came down the wooden stairs onto the sand. Pale blue shirt, white linen pants, sunglasses hooked at the open collar, handsome the way men get when they have decided to be handsome. Square shoulders, even tan, a slow, purposeful walk. He came toward the cabana at the speed of a man who wanted to be seen approaching. The wind shifted and carried his cologne ahead of him. Cedar and bergamot, the kind of scent a man picks when he wants to be remembered after he has left the room. Vera turned to me, and the color went out of her face. "Sawyer, kiss me. My ex is watching." I froze for 3 full seconds. She did not wait for my answer. She put one knee on my thigh and sat down, pressed one hand against my chest, and curled the other around my shoulder. Her breath was 4 inches from my mouth and smelled like cortado and mint. I did not kiss her. I put my hands on her hips, not to pull her closer, just to keep her balanced, and I looked her dead in the eye. "What part am I supposed to play here?" I whispered. She stopped breathing. Then, even quieter, "I need him to think I have someone. Just once. Just this one time." Garrett stood 20 yards out and did not take another step. I made a decision in about 2 seconds. I did not kiss her. Instead, I said, loud enough that the wind would carry it, "Do not turn around. Just keep looking at me." Then I put my hand on the back of her neck and pulled her head against my shoulder. Not a kiss, a close, intimate hold that, at 20 yards through bright sun, would read exactly the way she needed it to read. I held it for 3 seconds. I could feel her heart hitting through her dress. I put my mouth near her ear. "Get up with me," I said. "Stand. Walk to the lobby. I will explain in a minute." She nodded. We stood together. She did not look at Garrett. I did, for 1 second, and Garrett gave a small dry smile and turned away down the sand, hands in his pockets, like a man who had not gotten exactly the show he had paid for but had gotten enough. I walked her into the lobby. I steered her around the corner past the concierge desk and into a quiet alcove with a potted palm and one armchair. The whole building smelled like teak oil and lilies in a tall vase. I did not let go of her hand. "Who is Garrett?" She was shaking a little. "He is my ex-fiancé, 3 years ago. He called off the wedding by text message at 11 at night. This morning he sent me a message that he was coming down here with a new girlfriend. He wanted to catch up like friends. I did not want him to see me by myself. Vera, you could have just asked me, straight, why the performance." She was silent. She did not answer. The bracelet tapped softly against the wooden arm of the chair when she folded her hands in her lap. My phone rang at 1:18. "Whitney." I was not going to take the call, but Vera looked at the screen, and her expression changed in a way I cannot describe, except to say that it told me something I did not yet know. I picked up. "Sawyer," Whitney said, fast and clipped. "I sent your boss an email this morning. I wanted her to know what kind of man you are. The kind who walks out on a wife in the middle of her move. I attached a few old photos." I stood very still. "What photos?" "Photos of us in Cabo. I wanted her to know you have a past." I hung up. I looked at Vera. "You read Whitney's email this morning, did you?" Vera dropped her eyes. She nodded. I understood the whole shape of it at once. Whitney had left me because, in her words, I was not ambitious enough. She had been the one to move out, not me. I had even helped her carry boxes down to the rental truck because she had thrown her back out the week before. Now she was rewriting that story to torch me with my boss. Vera had read the email and still asked me to play boyfriend on the sand, not because she believed Whitney, but because she wanted to test whether I would run. Garrett was the second alibi laid on top of the first. 2 alibis, 1 truth she could not say. The architecture of it was almost neat. I almost respected it. "Vera," I said, "you used Garrett to cover something else. You read Whitney's email and you got scared I was going to pull back. You wanted to bind me to a moment before I had a chance to read the email and walk. Am I right?" She did not move for a long time. Her eyes were wet. She nodded. "I was not angry. That is the part of this story I want you to understand. I was not angry at all. I was tired in a clean way. The way you are tired after you finally see a thing that has been right in front of you for years." Vera was being squeezed between 2 pressures she could not control. Her ex had come back to prove she had not gotten over him, and my ex was trying to use me to humiliate the woman who had hired me. She picked the weakest move a strong person can make. She decided to perform. I was not going to punish her for that. I was just going to ask for the truth. I think this is the moment in the story where most men would have raised their voice. I have raised mine in my life. I did not raise it that afternoon. I had spent 4 years after my divorce learning how loud anger ruins a room you might still want to live in later. I was not going to ruin this room. "Go to your room," I said. "Close the door. In 2 hours I will knock. When I knock, you will tell me the truth. All of it. If you are not ready, do not open the door." I turned and walked across the lobby. I did not look back. 2 hours later I knocked on room 412. She opened it. She had washed her face. Her hair was twisted up. She had on an oversized white men's button-down, somebody's old shirt, sleeves rolled twice, the cuffs hanging past her wrists. She did not invite me to sit. She stood in the middle of the room and she started talking. And once she started, she did not stop. "6 years ago, you came in to interview at Kincaid. You fixed the clasp on my bracelet in the parking garage. You do not remember. I know. That night I went home and I told Marcus, I want to hire this man, and it is not because of his portfolio. Marcus thought I was joking. 6 months later I had the clasp replaced by a real jeweler. But I kept the original key charm because that was the piece you had actually touched. I did not take it off for 5 years. I wore it the day I married Garrett. He asked me at the altar why I was wearing a piece of jewelry that did not match the dress, and I could not give him a real answer. I think that is why he called the wedding off, in the end. He looked at me, and he saw somebody else in my eyes. She kept going. She did not look up. I did not say anything for 6 years because you were my employee. Then you were a married employee. Then you got divorced, and I waited a year because I did not want to be the woman who took advantage of a man during a soft year. Then 1 year became 2, and 3, and 6. This morning I read Whitney's email, and I panicked. I thought if you read it, you would step away from me out of embarrassment, even though you have nothing to be embarrassed about. I thought if Garrett showed up, I could use it as an excuse to pull you close just one time before you read the email. I was wrong. I am sorry. I did not speak for a long minute. I walked over to the window. I looked down at the beach. Cabana number 7 was still there, the cream umbrella still moving in the wind. From 4 floors up, it looked like a small white moth that did not know whether to land. I thought about how many afternoons of my own life I had spent telling myself a story about another person, only to find out years later that the person had been telling themselves a different story about me at the same time. 2 parallel scripts, both honest, neither shared. Most of human loneliness is that exact arrangement. Vera, I said, do you know what the part is that actually hurts? It is not the act on the daybed. It is not Whitney's email. It is that you thought I was small enough to need an excuse to stay. I turned around. I do not need a performance to stay. I just need you to tell me the truth. The first time, the last time, and every time in between. Can you do that? Vera cried for the first time in the 6 years I had known her. She nodded, but she did not say anything for a while because she could not. I did not hug her. I walked over, took her left wrist, the wrist with the bracelet, and held it in my hand. The bracelet was warm under my thumb. I had never noticed before how thin the chain actually was. It looked, up close, like something a person could break by accident if they were not careful. She had not broken it. She had worn it for 6 years without breaking it. That is a lot of mornings, a lot of showers, a lot of sweaters pulled over a head, a lot of small chances to lose a thing forever. This key, I said, you have been carrying it for 6 years. From today, I carry a copy. She laughed through the crying. She did not understand my line right away. I cleared it up. I am staying. Not because of what happened at the cabana. Because of what is happening in this room. 10 minutes later, somebody knocked on the door. Garrett. He was standing in the hall with both hands in his pockets. The cedar and bergamot cologne, reaching me before he even spoke, and he looked from me to Vera, who was behind my shoulder. I came up to say hello like a civilized adult, he said. Vera, it has been 3 years. I am glad to see you doing well. I did not step aside. I did not raise my voice. Vera is doing well. She does not need your blessing on it. You can go. Garrett looked at me a long beat. He measured me the way some men measure other men, top to bottom, jaw to shoes, and I let him. He nodded once. Okay. He turned and walked back down the hallway. He did not look over his shoulder. I closed the door, and the click of the latch was the loudest sound in the room. The room smelled like fresh linen and a little bit of freesia. Her white shirt smelled like Marseille soap. Her hand had gone cold again. The bracelet warmed up slowly inside my palm. 4 o'clock light cut through the sheer curtain and laid long stripes across the wood floor. Vera looked up at me, very quietly. Sawyer, you did not ask me what I was going to do next. I do not need to ask, I said. I just need you to open the door the next time I knock. I stepped back. I gave her a small smile. Will you go to dinner with me? Not as a performance. Because I am hungry. She laughed. It was the first real laugh she had given anyone all day, and it was a small one, and it was enough. We went back to work that Monday like nothing had happened. I still called her Vera in our weekly check-ins and Miss Kincaid in front of clients. She still turned the bracelet when she was thinking, but on the second Friday after Laguna, she sent me a text at 6 in the evening. I am cooking pasta. I made too much. Come over. I came. Her apartment was on Bluebird Canyon Drive, a 2-bedroom with a small balcony that looked west over the rooftops down to the water. She opened the door without lipstick, in a gray cashmere sweater I had never seen her in. We ate for 2 hours and we did not talk about work. We did not kiss. I left at 10:30. I drove back along Pacific Coast Highway with my window cracked, and somewhere near the mouth of the canyon, I caught myself smiling at the road. For no reason a stranger would have been able to explain. The first hard moment came that next Monday. Marcus stopped me in the hallway between the print room and the conference suite. He shut the door behind me. "Sawyer, you know I have to take this to the board, right?" I nodded. I had thought about it for the entire drive back from Bluebird Canyon. "I am moving over to partner consultant. I will not report to Vera anymore. I will not bill the firm directly. I will write a letter today." He looked at me for a long second and then he clapped me on the shoulder. "Good man. I have been waiting 6 years for one of you two to do something about this." Whichever way it broke, 3 months later, we drove up to Big Sur for a weekend. Not a retreat. Not a client. Just the two of us in a small wooden Airbnb perched on the edge of the cliff above the ocean. Saturday morning, she stood out on the deck with my flannel wrapped over her nightgown and a cup of cortado steaming in both her hands. The wind off the water was cold enough to make my breath visible. The whole canyon smelled like cypress. I came up behind her. I put my hands on her hips. This time it was not for balance. She leaned her head back into my shoulder. I bent down. I kissed her for the first time. "Slow," she cried a little in the middle of it. I did not ask her why. I already knew. The kiss did not belong to Garrett. It belonged to that deck and that flannel and that morning. And that was the entire point of waiting 3 months. 5 months after that, in late December, we drove to Pasadena for Christmas. Her father was a retired UCLA professor, a tall man with a quiet voice and steady hands. He shook my hand at the door and said, very plainly, "Vera has been telling me about you for 6 years. I am glad to finally meet you." I looked across the entryway at Vera. She turned the color of the wine in her hand. The house smelled like pine and wood smoke and a roast that had been in the oven for hours. The dining room was lit by 1 chandelier and 4 candles, and the walnut table was scratched in the way that only family tables get scratched, by decades of the same forks. Her mother put a hand on my forearm at one point and said, "She is not as hard as she looks. You probably know that already." I said I did. At dinner, under the chandelier, Vera unclasped the bracelet and laid it next to my plate. She said it under her breath, "Just for me. You hold it for tonight. I do not need it while you are here." Her father pretended not to notice. He noticed. That same night, around 11, Whitney called my phone. She was drunk. I listened for 3 seconds and hung up. I did not say a word about it. Vera did not ask. She had the bracelet back in her hand by then. I had put it on her wrist while we were doing the dishes, with the warm soap water still on my fingers, and she had smiled into the sink without looking up. A year and 2 months after Laguna, in early summer, we drove back down to the Montage. We did it on purpose. Same hotel, same week. We walked down to the beach at noon, and we set up at Cabana number 7 on purpose. Vera was not in a silk dress this time. She was in a cotton one, and reading a hardcover on her stomach next to me. I was reading the Wall Street Journal because that is the kind of thing a 40-year-old man does on vacation. She held her wrist up to show me the old gold bracelet, the original key charm. Next to it, a second charm, a small silver house, an exact miniature of the elevation I had drawn for the Crystal Cove Villa, the project that had finally broken ground 6 months earlier. She had taken my sketch to a jeweler in Beverly Hills and asked him to render it in silver. "It has been a year," she said. "Do you remember sitting in this cabana?" "I remember," she smiled. "This time, I am asking you politely. Kiss me, Sawyer." I laughed. I kissed her. There was no one standing on the sand, no ex, no alibi, just us, and the sound of the water, and an umbrella the color of cream. Earlier that spring, an envelope had come to the studio with Vera's name on it. A wedding invitation. Garrett, to a woman named Eliza, at the Pelican Hill Resort in Newport Beach. Vera read it once at her desk and laughed once and brought it down the hall to me. I tore it in half over the trash can without reading the whole thing. She watched me do it. "I was going to write him back," she said. "I do not need to anymore." After I kissed her at the cabana, I reached for her wrist and clasped the bracelet back on. "You keep wearing this," I said. "There is more of me on it now." She looked at the 2 charms and then up at me, and she said, "Good." We did not say much else for the rest of that afternoon. There was nothing left to perform. There had not been for a long time. We watched the umbrella sway in the wind. I think we both knew that we were sitting in the exact same spot where the whole story had almost gone wrong a year earlier. and that we had earned the right to sit there again, very quietly, with nothing to prove and no one we needed to convince of anything at all. I lived for 39 years before I understood one thing. The people who love you for real do not do it loudly. They do not announce it. They do not demand it. They just stand next to you, for 6 years if they have to, wearing a small charm on a wrist that you had touched once in a parking garage on the first day they ever met you. And they wait. Vera did not sit on my lap that day because her ex was watching. She sat on my lap because she had been waiting 6 years for any reason to touch me without having to ask permission first. Garrett was just an alibi. Whitney was just an alibi. Life gives all of us 100 good alibis not to say the true thing. A good person uses one of them. A better person throws the alibi away and says the real thing out loud, the way Vera did in room 412. I did not kiss her on the cabana. I am glad I did not. If I had, that first kiss would always have belonged to Garrett. It belonged instead to a wooden deck in Big Sur, my flannel around her shoulders, a cup of cortado between her hands, a small gold bracelet, a little key charm. 6 years. Sometimes a woman does not need to say I love you. She just needs to wear something every day and wait for you to be awake enough to look at her wrist. So I want to ask you 2 things tonight. Do you think I should have kissed her on the cabana, or was I right to hold back? Why? And has there been someone in your life who wore a bracelet of their own, a small sign you walked past for years, that you only understand now looking back? If this story touched you, hit like so I know you are out there. Subscribe, and turn the bell on for next Sunday's story. Leave your answers in the comments. I read every single one.